r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. Urban explorers. What is the creepiest we're not alone experience you've had? My friends and I were exploring an abandoned restaurant in this beach town one winter night. We snuck in through a broken window on the shore side to avoid being spotted by any cars driving by. Overall, inside it was your typical abandoned restaurant, but was still really cool to check out. There was a long bar, tables tossed about, etc. We walked downstairs into a wine cellar and started walking through the labyrinth of hallways. The basement was deceptively larger than we would have expected for a beachside restaurant. Anyway, we wander into this room off one of the hallways and shine our flashlight in the corner, and we see an unmade bed cot with all of the trappings of someone currently living there, a safety razor next to the mirror, random other belongings. Our stomachs immediately dropped as we realized we were currently in someone's living quarters, and promptly noped the duck out of there. To this day we still don't know if the person was hiding in the basement with us, waiting for us to leave, or if we stumbled on it while they were out and about. Either way, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by someone from the shadows of that basement. I thought this was gonna be a Goonies reference. So there's a moderately well-known abandoned mental hospital close to my town. A few months back a few friends and I went to explore a bit. Not a rare thing for people here. We found this setup of a few folding chairs and a couple of old mattresses with blankets and whatever else you'd imagine on them. We chilled there for about 10 minutes and then went on with our adventure upwards. Pretty uneventful from then on. A few really cool graffiti murals. Awesome view from the roof. When we were coming back down we passed through the room and all the chairs were folded up and neatly stacked against the wall and the beds were made. Or at least as close to that as it could have been. Whoever did it would have most likely known that we were there and waited for us to leave to do all of that, as it was only a time frame of about 45 minutes. No threats or anything, just an eerie feeling of being watching in an abandoned mental hospital. Edit. Kings Park Psychiatric Center. I replied to like 4 of y'all and got about 20 others asking on mayo. Oh man, haha. My ex-girlfriend, a friend of hers, and I did almost the exact same thing. Also while exploring an abandoned psychiatric hospital. In our case we heard a group of teenagers coming in as we were on our way out and decided to have a little fun with them. We waited for them to pass through a classroom that you couldn't avoid due to structural damage in the corridor, and really quickly lined up the desks that had been sort of scattered around the room. I wish we had stuck around to see how they responded, but her friend had to get home. The area I'm currently in is a touristy beach place, so being winter it's completely devoid of life. There's a lot of apartments, hotels around that are just shells. No windows or doors. At 2 AM I went to go to the local garage to grab some smokes as we were running low. It's dead quiet and you can hear the tiniest sounds. I was walking past one such building when I felt like I was being watched. I looked up and around but I couldn't hear or see anything. So I carried on walking but slow, now trying to be as quiet as possible while listening for anything strange. Suddenly every single dog around just went crazy barking. Like dead silence to deafening barking in a second. Made me jump 10 feet. Looked up and on the 3rd floor of an apartment that got no windows or doors put in yet is a single dog just staring at me. I literally turned around and walked straight back home and figured that I'd just go at a more reasonable time. I lived in China for the last 18 years. At night I would get bored and go out riding on my scooter and just explore various roads. This incident was about 14 years ago. There was a place I had been to in the daytime. Down a country road that was mostly green hills and forest. Somewhere there was a little settlement where they were building a whole bunch of new things, including an apartment building that was at least 20 stories high. It was just a shell. No windows or doors or fittings yet. Or even stairs. Just the concrete for each of the floors and some of the walls. That night I rode past and stopped. There were bamboo ladders leading up to the first few floors. And more bamboo ladders inside going all the way up the building. The entire building was filled with people, and they were families too. Mom, dad, cooking pots, they had little fires going and were cooking, children and even babies. There were hundreds of people living there, and as I stopped there with the engine running, more and more heads started appearing. people watching me. They were all silent. Nobody called out. They just looked. So I rode off again and felt spooked. I should be thankful this is my creepiest story. So I was at an abandoned medical school in a pretty bad city with my friend. My friend told me homeless people squat there but only on the first floor. She even said one of her friends sat their backpack down and had it stolen by one of them in plain sight. So we avoided it and explored the second floor. We kept hearing random noises like someone loosely following us, so we kept on guard but never saw anything. We were then in this room and heard a louder noise and look over to see a cat just chillin'. It was the cat following us all along, cause after stopping to pet it and moving on, it continued following us, making the noises we kept hearing. It eventually came right up to us to be pet. We assumed it was a stray and wanted to get it help. So we agreed that if it followed us out, we'll take it somewhere or to someone who will care for it. It followed us outside, then immediately ran from us when we were like, lol, well guess we got a cat now. So I went to see where it went. Only to see one of the doors to the bando open and this like 6FT plus dude walk out and yell at me, "You're ducking with my cat?" I just about shit myself thinking I was about to get murdered or something, haha. I was like, "Oh, is that your cat?" He followed us out. He's like, "Yeah, it's my cat. Colonel Mustard. Get over here." And the cat comes running to him. He introduced himself and we talked for a bit. He was actually a really cool guy. Said he lives there and studies psychology and stuff to keep occupied. Bonus. Picture of Col. Mustard. Thanks for the picture of Colonel Mustard. So I take a lot of time lapses of nature and stuff. One clear night I decided to drive out to the middle of nowhere to get a time lapse of the stars. I found a lake that seemed like a cool spot to shoot and set up. About 20 minutes in I hear a noise and look up to see a light above me. Sure enough, a drone is right above me just hovering. It freaked me out, so I booked it out of there. I later learned I was trespassing on government property. How did you find out you were on gov property? There's an old flour mill on Harbor Island in Seattle. It's been abandoned and locked up for a while. My buddies went through a pretty serious urban X phase near the end of high school, so we were going to all sorts of weird and interesting places in the area just checking it out. Got chased out by cops a few times. Usual stuff. Anyway, inside this flour mill we're working our through some of the regular block areas. And our buddy swears he heard something. We all stopped dead in our tracks. Lights pointed down. Just listening. The amount of noise a dilapidated building makes when you're trying to be quiet is amazing. Constant creaking and wind noises. Then I start to hear it. It was shuffling. With the sound of somebody dragging something across concrete. At this point I can feel my heart jumping out of my chest. The blood pulsing in my ears and head. I'm hyper aware as I try and pinpoint this sound and associate it with something I knew. By the time we're sure it's not just the wind. We've all heard the noises. There was 5 of us in there, and we're starting to think it's coming from near the stairs. We slowly, achingly, creep our way over broken glass and dirt. When we came up on the stairwell, we shined our lights down and up to the adjacent landings for the floor we were on and couldn't see anything. That water bottle was a homeless man's Horcrux. So there's this building in my city that has been abandoned for over a decade. The building itself covers over 40 acres, so it's pretty well known by explorers that if the cops come they won't search for you inside but wait for you to come out. The second time I went to explore this building we were looking for a way inside. Keep in mind this is taking place early in the morning, maybe 3 AM. We come across this section of the building that was a large outdoor amphitheater. We walked down to the center and went up to the boarded up windows. And ever so faintly on the other side of the wood you could hear someone talking to themselves. We got the duck out of there. Hold the duck up. A building that covers 40 whole ass acres? I spent 2004 to 2009 living in a dilapidated warehouse that had a space over it converted into an apartment. In exploring the warehouse beneath it before moving in, a buddy of mine and I were discussing how the place smelled and was haunted. In making jokes about it we started laughing when something shattered on the wall near us. We were seriously startled and contemplating what it could have been when someone shouts, "Shut the duck up." And there's a homeless man throwing what I assume is a second bottle at us from across the space. In a non-threatening way. I calmly state, "Are you sure you should be in here?" He waves something at me and yells at me to call the police if I don't like it. Was he a good roommate when you moved in upstairs? I see him being like an even weirder Kramer. I live in a big US West Coast city. In a neighborhood where most homes go right up to the sidewalk property line and have a yard in back. My place is the opposite. House is at the back of the lot. Front yard keeps me buffered from street noise. It's a nice, dark little oasis in the city. My house has a double door split door, so the top can open independently of the bottom. I often leave the top open when the weather's nice. I'm sitting on the couch in the living room, all of 15 feet from the door. It's nighttime. I'm reading, and the door's more or less directly in front of me. The porch light's off. Yard's dark. The only light's from the dimmed reading lamp I'm using. The wind keeps blowing the top part of the door open. Closed. Open. Closed. I'm used to it. Happens all the time. Doesn't sound out of place. Until the door kind of misses a beat. I don't hear it thud closed. I look up. And it's perfectly still. Only open 2 or 3 inches. It's one of those WTF am I seeing moments. There's like a 15-mile-per-hour wind outside. How is the top part of the door partially open and perfectly still? Then my eyes or brain recognizes it. The outline of a hoodie. Drawstrings. Hood up. In that instant I am frozen and my heart is pounding. Someone is literally standing right there. Hood up. Holding my door open. I can't see his face. But he sees me noticing because he says, "You should keep your doors locked." Mother duck, I'm what? Now my adrenaline kicks in. I jump up shouting. He bolts. I get the porch light on in time to see him running out the gate. I still wonder how long he'd been standing there or WTF he was doing thinking. The door has been very ducking locked since then. As I read your story, I got to someone standing right there and my other phone dings a notification and I jumped. I explored part of an old Nike or Atlas missile site one night with a few friends. As we were leaving, someone started shining a laser pointer at us from the woods. Somehow, we couldn't actually see where they were even though that's usually pretty easy to do with laser pointers. I still wonder if it was just a laser pointer and not a laser sight instead. If it was a missile site, I'd go with possible guard and laser sight. There was an old house down the road from where we lived in the country. It was broken and falling apart. But as a kid that was like the biggest draw for our curiosity. We decided to travel through the brush and go inside it on one of our bike rides. And we found loads of neat stuff. Magazines. Old busted antique looking furniture. It was actually pretty cool. We knew from stories our dad told us about the house that there should have been a few nice apple trees around, so we wandered outside to go find them. But what we found was a newer van hidden around a bushy area and covered with sticks. Remnants of a camp area with smoke still coming from the campfire but no one that we could see. We noped out of there and told our parents. Turned out it was someone who had run the border and was camping out in the woods. No other details were relayed to us about it. But pretty creepy for our 12-year-old selves. That reminds me about a neighbor who found a backpacker living at the bottom of her garden and promptly called the police. The backpacker wasn't there, so the police moved his stuff. Later that day the backpacker turned up on her doorstep yelling at her. This was back in summer 2012. Every morning my mum used to take me and my brother to our grandparents while she went to work. My grandparents lived in a really isolated rural zone. Near my grandparents' house there was a huge abandoned factory. And I've always wanted to go to see what was in there. So I begged my uncle, he lived at my grandparents' house, to explore that building. He said yes. So we went to the building and searched for an opening to get inside. Once inside, we started to look around the place. And obviously found nothing except old machines and stuff like that. When we was about to leave, we heard noises coming from upstairs. And then steps. We saw a shadow coming towards us. So we got the feck out of there running. A few days later, I was at my grandparents' house with all my cousins. Suddenly, the neighbors rang our doorbell and told us that there was someone breaking into our back garden. My uncle went out to check while one of my cousins called 112, local police number. Soon after the call, My uncle came back inside. And he told us that he saw that guy that had broke in. Running towards the old abandoned building. I never discovered if the guy in the building and the other in the garden were the same person. Pretty ducked up story. Break into my house will ya? Well, two can play at that game. Juck. Ducking, like and subscribe.